The Neighbor's Secret. In this video, I will tell you a terrifying story about a house that no one dared to approach. When I was a child, we had a strange neighbor. He never came outside during the day, never talked to anyone, and at night, something eerie happened in his house. One day, I accidentally stepped onto his property and saw something I was never supposed to see. Who was he really? Why did the adults avoid his house? And what happened that night when I decided to uncover the truth? Watch until the end. The scariest part awaits you. The house everyone feared. I grew up in a quiet town where everyone knew each other. Parents let their kids play outside until late in the evening without worry. But on our street, there was one house that no one ever went near. It stood at the corner, old, with peeling paint and a broken mailbox. A man lived there, but we never knew his name. We just called him the neighbor. He never came outside during the day. Adults never spoke about him, almost like they wanted to pretend he didn't exist. But at night, strange noises would come from his house, heavy thuds, like furniture being dragged, scratching against the walls, and sometimes muffled sobbing or low, guttural moans. I once asked my mum about him. "Never go near that house," she said firmly, "just stay away." But the more I was told to stay away, the more I wanted to know what was inside. A small mistake. One day, my friends and I were playing ball outside. I kicked it too hard, and with a dull thud, the ball sailed over the tall fence of the neighbor's yard. We all froze. "It's gone," Dan muttered. "That ball belongs to him now." "But he never comes out," I protested. I walked up to the fence. It was old, with deep scratches on the wood, like someone had been clawing at it for years. "Just leave it," Meg whispered nervously. But I didn't listen. I squeezed through a gap in the fence and stepped into the yard. The grass here was yellow and dead, unlike the green lawns of the rest of the neighborhood. It looked like nothing had grown here for decades. My ball lay near the porch. I took a step forward, and the house door creaked open. Through the gap, I saw a face staring at me. Unfamiliar eyes. I froze. The face disappeared. But now I could hear soft footsteps behind the door. I slowly picked up my ball and noticed footprints in the dust on the porch. Bare footprints, but the toes were too long. I turned to run, but creak. The door opened wider. I saw him, the neighbor, tall and hunched, wearing a faded shirt. His skin was too pale, stretched tight like thin paper. But the worst part was his eyes. They were wrong. I can't explain how, but they weren't supposed to look like that. I spun around and bolted for the fence, but before I could escape, he whispered behind me, "Now you know. The old house's secret." I never told anyone what happened, but after that night, I felt him watching me. Every time I walked past his house, I saw movement behind the curtains, a shadow shifting, watching. A few weeks later, I made a terrible decision. I decided to go back. I don't know why. Something was pulling me toward that house. I slipped through the fence again. The windows were dark. I stepped onto the porch, and I heard a deep, heavy breath. From below me, something that should not wake. I froze. A step from somewhere underneath me. I looked down and realized that the ground in this yard was soft, like it had been recently dug up. I turned to run, but at that moment, the house door swung open, and I saw a hand reaching from the darkness. It wasn't human. But that wasn't the worst part, because behind me, from beneath the earth, something was rising. I screamed and ran, and as I leapt over the fence, I heard footsteps right behind me. But I didn't dare look back. The disappearance. The next morning, I told my mom. She turned pale, and then she said something I never expected. "That house has been abandoned for 20 years. "But I saw him." My mom looked at me with a strange expression. "You saw what you wanted to see. I never went near that house again." But one morning, we woke up to the sound of police cars. My neighbor was gone, disappeared without a trace, and in his backyard, in the dry, dead grass, they found an open grave. The strangest part? Inside were 2 empty coffins. Who lives beyond the walls? Years passed. The house remained empty, until last winter when a new family moved in. A few weeks later, they moved out. I ran into the man who had bought the house and asked him why he left. He turned pale and said, "Something lives in that house." What? His lips tightened. I heard footsteps under the floor. Since then, no one has dared to live there. And sometimes, when I walk by, I still hear them too. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, hollow, and every time I remember what the neighbor told me when I picked up my ball. Now you know. But what was I supposed to know? I still don't have the answer, but I do know one thing for sure. That house was never meant to be empty.